Hello, my name is Zeke. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be my May reading wrap-up. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read this month. Technically, I'm filming this on the 30th, so there's still a few more hours left, maybe full day, that I could get some reading done, but I know that I'm probably not going to finish anything else. So I'm just going to do this now, go through everything now, so I can get this up at the end of the month rather than a few days into June. So I read, I think, 7 books this month. I guess we'll see. I forgot the exact number, which I'm pretty happy about because it was a busy month and I was still able to read a lot. And nothing that ended up being 5 stars, which is disappointing, but I'm still very happy with the selections. It was all between 3 and 4.5 stars, which is kind of average for me, I think, but I still know that there's some books in this list that I will definitely be thinking about for a long time, so I'm still going to say this month was a success. The first thing that I read this month, I read digitally, so I don't have something to hold up, but I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and this book is a very, very weird book. It's also very short, but it's told from 3 perspectives. We're focused on this young woman who one day decides she's going to be a vegetarian. She's been having these weird dreams that have convinced her that she cannot eat meat, and the story kind of follows out for there, and it gets weirder and weirder as it goes on. We have 3 perspectives. We start with the perspective of her husband, and he is just terrible, and he's very hateable, and so you kind of see that relationship and what kind of happens there. You see also then the brother-in-law who also exploits her in insane ways. Like it's really, you have to read it to understand just how crazy this whole thing gets. And then finally we get the perspective of her sister. We kind of just see how this decision to become a vegetarian impacts all of them. It sounds like a weird premise, and it is, but it really goes beyond that. It talks a lot about abuse, sexual exploitation, and just the way like society views women, and women who are like different. And it was pretty good. It was very weird, as I said, and I ended up giving it 3 stars just because I enjoyed it a lot, and I will be thinking about it, but it was very strange, and honestly the writing was not necessarily my cup of tea, and I don't know that how much I really thought the 3 perspectives worked, but it was very interesting and definitely will be in my mind for a long time, and was definitely an interesting way to start off the month. Next thing that I read was Wayward by Amelia Hart, and this I knew absolutely nothing about going into it because I got it from Book of the Month, and I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. We basically once again follow 3 perspectives. This time it's throughout a large period of time. We follow the oldest perspective, which is a witch or not an actual witch, but someone who's being tried at a witch hunt. And then we have a middle kind of perspective during like the 1940s, where we have this girl who is living at her family's estate with her family, and there's all sorts of things going on, but she's kind of learning her family history and also struggling against her family because she is a girl and she wants to do certain things that obviously she can't do because of the time period. And then finally we follow a modern perspective of this woman running away from her abusive relationship and kind of discovering her family history and all of that. And it all comes together in the end in an interesting way. And there's lots of discussions of family, of mother-daughter relationships, of just women, familial relationships between women in general. And it's just really interestingly done. I definitely call things interesting a lot, but I feel like that's the only way that I can really sum up my feelings on this. It didn't really leave me shook in any way. Like, I'm not gonna be thinking about this for a long time, but it was really enjoyable to read. It was nice enough. It has an interesting, soft magic system that's just very whimsical and nice to read. So I also gave this 3 stars. Okay, the next book I read was Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I also read this digitally, and I picked this up because I've been wanting to read Foster by Claire Keegan, which is another one of her books, but the library did not have that available, so I just got this one instead. and I didn't really know anything going into it once again, but basically follow this man. He's like delivers coal in this small Irish town. We're nearing Christmas. It's very atmospheric. That's the one thing that I will say I cannot fault the book for at all. I think it's incredibly atmospheric and really good at building that kind of Christmas time, small village type of feeling. But we're following this man as he goes on deliveries. He's just living his everyday life. We follow him with his family, and there's kind of this catalyst event where he goes to deliver coal at a kind of convent, and things go awry, and it's supposed to be very heartwarming, and I bet if you're a normal person, then it is. I just, for some reason, did not really do it for me. I felt like it was very simple, and it was obviously a very sad premise because of what ends up happening. I don't even want to say, because it feels like it's so short that it's like a spoiler, and it's really, there's nothing beyond that. Like, that's just what it is. It's this book that explores this one topic, and it's good at that, but it didn't really do much for me beyond that, and so I also just gave it 3 stars. But I think it's still, like, people really like this book, so I think it's something, it's like a me problem, because also the writing is really nice. As I said, the atmosphere is incredible. I just couldn't really connect with it for whatever reason, and that's why I gave it 3 stars. But I think plenty of people will like this, and I would still recommend it. It's just a very specific type of book. The next thing I read for school, American classic, The Great Gatsby. I feel like everyone reads this for school, but I finally did read it, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was probably the best book I read this month. Not a huge surprise. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5, just because it was everything I really wanted and more. I didn't really know much about like what it was about thematically. I knew the general idea of it, but just kind of exploring the American dream, expectations versus reality, to put it simply. Also just the 1920s at the time, the lost generation, and the characters are so real and really imagined through our narrator's perspective in a really visceral way, and I just think it's obviously really well written. It's very flowery writing. I think that's the best way to put it, which I was not expecting at all, but I ended up really enjoying it. And also another short classic. I love short classics because I don't want to sit down and read a classic that I know is going to be dense and also going to be like 500 pages. Usually I have to be in a really specific mindset for that, but this also was not dense. It's not the easiest thing to read in the world, but I don't think it's hard to read, and definitely worth your time if you've, like, for some reason not read The Great Gatsby. I think it can be like intimidating, like, oh, a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's a really important book to read just to kind of understand America as well, and just really interesting to actually read it after having heard of it for so long. So yeah, that, once again, probably best book I read this month, and I got a lot out of reading it for school, as I think most people do. Next book, the next 2 books actually, I just picked up from the library out of the blue. I went to the library, and my library had a very small selection, if we're being honest, of books, and so these are the books I picked up, but that isn't to say that I didn't enjoy them and I wasn't excited about them. It's just all I could find. So the first book I picked up was Luster by Raven Lalani, and this is something I had been wanting to read for a while. I just never got around to it, and this is very popular, and it ended up being very good. I basically follow this woman. It's a very strange premise. Lots of books with strange premises this month, but she starts dating this man, or going out with this man who's already in an open marriage and has adopted a black daughter, and the protagonist is black, and she kind of enters into this weird relationship with the family, with the wife, with the daughter, and she kind of builds these weird connections with them individually. And I thought that was really interesting to explore, especially the relationship between her and the mother, or her and the wife, just because it was so, obviously when you're going into it, you're expecting to see how she interacts with the husband, but just seeing how she interacts with the wife is such an interesting dynamic. And also just the way that this book is written. It's written in a very witty way. It's written in a very kind of snappy way, so it feels really easy to read, and really just enjoyable to read. And it explores ideas around race and power, like power imbalances, also sexuality and art. And it's just really atmospheric, not in a very different way than like small things like these, because this place takes place in New York City. It's really well written and really well described, and I'm just really happy that I ended up enjoying this, because I wasn't really sure if I was going to, but I did, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Okay, the next book I read, as I said, just picked from the library, is Blue Nights by Joan Didion, and I don't have a lot to say about this. I have been reading a lot of Joan Didion, but this is only my second memoir nonfiction from her, and luckily enough for me, this is the only thing they had, and it kind of follows up from the other memoir I've read from her, which is The Year of Magical Thinking, which basically talks about her husband dying, and then this one talks about the death of her daughter, which occurred not long after, and just really interesting to see the differences between them, because I think, The Year of Magical Thinking I read in January, and this I obviously just read, and even though they're about very similar subjects of grief, they explore that topic very differently. They were also written like 9 years apart. She wrote The Year of Magical Thinking kind of, I think, as everything was happening, and this she took time to reflect, and I feel like that really shows. She's older when she writes this. She talks about feeling frail, she talks about memory a lot, and she shares a lot of memories she's had with her daughter, and it just feels like a really nice, I mean, not nice, the topic's obviously depressing, but it's a very different book from The Year of Magical Thinking, which is really about grief, and this is still about grief, but it spends a lot more time talking about just memories she has and experiences she's had, and I think it's less depressing, and it's really interesting. I don't think it hit me as hard as The Year of Magical Thinking does, but I don't really want to be like, oh, this tragedy was sadder than this tragedy. Like, they were both obviously terrible events in her life, but I think it was really well explored in this book. And you don't have to read The Year of Magical Thinking to read this. I would still recommend this, and I think this is also on the shorter side. So I would highly recommend. I gave this 4 stars as well. Last book that I have finished this month is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley, and this was a lot. We follow this girl. She's a teenager. She's almost 18, but she's really struggling. She lives with her brother, and both her parents are not around for various reasons, and they live by themselves, and there's a lot going on in their lives, but they cannot afford the rent, basically, and rent is being raised. That's like the inciting incident of this book. We follow the sister, and she's basically trying to figure out any way she can to make money, and she has to turn to walking the streets at night, and she really doesn't have any other options, and she gets caught up in this big scandal with local police, and things just escalate, and it's really depressing. It's very real, unfortunately. There's no happy ending in this book, not to spoil anything, but it's not a happy book in the slightest, although there are moments of joy, and I think the ending does have a moment of joy that I really enjoyed, just because it is such a hard topic, and it talks a lot about exploitation. It talks a lot about the problems with capitalism in America. What a surprise. And I'm really glad I read this, because I've been wanting to read this for a while, heard so many good things about it, and was highly acclaimed. And I think it came out last year, and it finally came out on paperback, so that's when I buy things, because I'm not spending money on hardcover unless it's Babel by Rebecca Kwong. But yeah, this was really good. Just a very hard thing to read. Make sure you're prepared before you're going into this, but definitely some really rough scenes in this book, but definitely worth your time, worth the energy it takes to actually read this, and I would highly recommend. I also give this 4 stars. So that's gonna do it for this month. That's everything I read, except I do want to quickly talk about another country. I mentioned I did a library reading blog. This is the other book I got from the library. I'm about halfway through. I'm really enjoying it. It's really dense, so it's taking me a while, and I also took a break, but I'm definitely really enjoying this. I'm just taking my time with it, because it's a book you need to take your time with, and I'm just really enjoying the ride. It's a lot. There's a lot of different things happening. There's weird stuff with perspectives, and I don't know. We'll see how it goes. You'll have to wait until next month to see how everything ended up. But I'm not going to finish this before the end of the month, but I'll probably finish it within the first few days of June. So I will let you know how that goes next month. But those are all the books that I have read and started in May. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you want. I try to post videos around once a week. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. And I will see you in the next one.